The smell hits first, an ugly thing, thick and wet like rust and sweet milk gone to war in the heat. Daniel Brooks freezes halfway through, swinging his machete at a bramble, the blade hanging in the air while that sour reek presses into his nose and coats his tongue. Morning mist unspools across his fence line, a thin silver ribbon between his pasture and the dark lip of the Oregon timber. Birds go quiet. Even the breeze seems to hold its breath. At the base of an old white oak, he sees it, a crown of fungus that shouldn't be there. Not like this, not so swollen and bright. Lurid oranges bleed into bruise purple. Caps bloom like torn flags. A slick sheen glistens where the light breaks through. Flies stitch and unstitch themselves from the folds. Under it, the earth looks churned, as if a giant hand pressed down and never took the weight back. Daniel steps closer. The leaf litter squelches. The smell deepens. Rot, pennies, a meat sweetness that doesn't belong to the woods. He crouches, puts the flat of his blade against the largest clump, nudges. The whole mat shivers as if breathing. He snatches the blade back. His stomach rolls. He's been poor most of his life, but not fragile. Storm-bent fence posts, dying cows, nights where the generator stayed silent. He knows what hard looks like. But this is different. This is wrong. Easy, he whispers to no one. His voice sounds borrowed. Daniel presses his boot heel into the soil around the oak. The ground gives, looser than it should be, like a grave that forgot how to be solid. He pushes farther, and the heel sinks a little. A mosquito whines near his ear. He slaps blind and misses. The smell keeps pushing, keeps insisting. He straightens and traces the edge of the loosened dirt with the machete tip. A circle almost. No, an oval. His breath stutters. He could walk away. Pretend he didn't see. Pretend the fence line isn't his to tend. Pretend the world is kind enough to let him pretend. Instead, he pulls his phone. His thumb hesitates above a name he's dialed in storms and during calving seasons. James Whitaker. A friend who shows up with a thermos and a steady laugh. A man who knows how to keep quiet when quiet matters. James, he says when the line clicks. I need you. Bring shovels. If the rental yard's open, a mini excavator. By the north fence, the big oak with the lightning scar. And, he swallows the taste of metal. Hurry. He ends the call and pockets the phone. The forest holds its silence like a threat. The oak looms, lightning scar like a crooked grin. He doesn't touch the fungus again. He doesn't kneel. He waits, eyes fixed on that radiant, reeking crown, and tries not to imagine what kind of story grows good out of rot like that. When James's truck crunches the gravel 20 minutes later, Daniel's shoulders sag and then brace again. Something more than fungus sits under that oak, and whatever it is has been waiting. The smell says so. The loosened earth says so. The flies say so every time they lift and settle, as if rehearsing for an audience that hasn't yet found its seat. You okay? James calls as he climbs down. 2 shovels clanking in the bed, a rented Mini on the trailer behind. No, Daniel says. But we're here. He points with the machete. There. They walk together toward the oak, the day brightening around them, the world sharpening into edges. And beneath the riot of fungus, the ground breathes. It should be a simple morning. Fix a fence, grease the tractor, check the heifer due to calve. That's what Daniel Brooks plans when he pulls on his faded jacket at first light. His place sits in a crooked bowl of land east of town, where fog hangs low and the rooster argues with the highway a mile away. The house is small. The barns are smaller. The debts are not. A coffee mug clinks on the table, cold already because he sipped too slowly while staring at the month's bills and the fine print that seems to breed like rats. He talks to himself more than he should since Velma Brooks passed. His mother, stubborn and gentle. The only person who could cut the silence in this house into slices worth sharing. Now it's just the dry tick of the clock and the complaint of old floorboards when he crosses to the door. He sets his hat, steps out, and is met by the taste of wet cedar and distant diesel. Cattle breathe steam into the air. The pasture wears the kind of green you only get after an honest rain and a long wait. If you love stories that begin with a small thing, a smell, a sound, and peel back into something that changes everything, don't miss what's coming. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This is a true-to-life kind of mystery, the kind that starts on an ordinary morning and ends with blue lights and hard truths. Stay with me till the end. There's a reason a poor farmer with nothing but stubbornness and prayer ended up making a call that echoed through a whole county. Daniel's boots carry him along the north fence. where the boundary between his land and timber company property blurs under blackberry and alder. He's patched this run of fence more times than he can count. The oak ahead has grown around the wire like a bad habit, and storms gnawed at the post till they leaned like men at a bar at closing time. He worries a lot. Money, weather, the way soil compacts when you drive it too wet. But he tries not to worry about what he can't fix with his own hands. His phone stays in a cracked case tucked into his back pocket, more hammer than computer in his mind. But the world has a way of teaching you new uses. Today it will become a lifeline, a confession and a boundary marker between the before and the after. He hears an owl, late to bed, complains somewhere beyond the timber cut. A stack of alder logs sits in tidy temporary order just inside the tree line, chalk marks ghosting their ends. The air has that cold, clean bite that promises a decent day. He breathes deeper. He thinks about pancakes and decides to settle for toast later. He thinks about calling the bank manager and decides to put it off. He thinks about the fence and the oak and the way mushrooms sometimes show you where the rot is. When he sees the fungus, he knows. Not what, not yet, but he knows enough to stop pretending the morning belongs to him. He knows enough to feel the old barn owl of dread lift its wings in his chest and settle heavier. James arrives. Good man. Used to lay pipe for long stretches upstate. Came back when his knees went and his father got sick. He helps Daniel when harvest comes faster than hands and never asks for more than gas money and a hot lunch. He has a laugh that could jiggle nails out of a board and a quiet that could tuck a baby to sleep. They stand over the oak like men at a graveside who don't want the service to start. The world narrows to smell and color and the unraveling threads of the day's plan. Folks, I say to you as you watch, what happens next is as simple as digging and as complicated as conscience. If you're still with me, tap that like. Let's keep going. James hands Daniel a shovel, keeps one for himself, and angles his body so the morning sun clips the glare off the wet caps of the fungus. That smell, he mutters, pinching the bridge of his nose, like when the cannery's chillers died and the whole line went sour. Yeah, Daniel swallows. His mouth doesn't want to be a mouth. Here, he says, and with the shovel's edge he outlines the softer ground, tracing a long oval the way you might trace a scar to feel its edges. They work around the fungus, not through it, as if it were a marker with rights. Each bite of shovel peels back damp plates of loam. The soil breaks too easily, as if air has been breathing through it from below. Worms curl and vanish. Beetles stumble into light and scramble back under roots. The smell fattens with every scoop, dragging at the back of the throat until breathing becomes a choice you have to make on purpose. Daniel spits, then spits again. James switches to slow, shallow breaths and still gags. Careful, Daniel says when metal rings on something that isn't stone. A dull thunk, not root, not rock. They scrape by hand, gloved fingers pruning under the wet earth until a flap of blue shows. Plastic, wrinkled and mud-veined. Aw, hell, James whispers. Tarp. Daniel freezes with his palm hovering over the plastic. Every instinct wants to smooth it flat and see, but another instinct, older, harder, locks his wrist. The flies lift and resettle, a black punctuation over the blue. A jay screams twice and bolts deeper into the trees. The oak's lightning scar looks like a crooked grin. Leave it, he says, voice thin. Leave it for the law. James nods. Habit makes him neaten the cut, flicking clods from the edges until the oval comes into focus. Longer than a man is tall, belly round where tape bites tight. The folds in the tarp run the wrong direction, against the logic of wrapping furniture or scrap. Someone tried to make something messy into straight lines and lost. Daniel eases back on his heels. The blue lies there like a question that will bloom into only one kind of answer. He pulls out his phone, thumbs clumsy with mud, and dials. The ring is clean and bright in his ear. Indecent. 911. What's your emergency? My name is Daniel Brooks, he says, surprised at how level he sounds. North fence line off Mill Creek Road, by the old white oak with a lightning scar. We were digging to reset fence, found a blue tarp under loose soil. It smells wrong. Understood, Mr. Brooks. Please do not touch or move anything. Are you and anyone with you safe? Yes, ma'am. Just me and my buddy. Stay where you are. Units are en route. If you see anyone approach who isn't law enforcement, keep them back. I'll stay on the line if you want. He doesn't want to hear his own breathing in a stranger's ear. We'll wait. He pockets the phone. They back away in small steps, like edging past a sleeping dog you don't want to wake. James unties the excavator from the trailer and then ties it again. Feels wrong to leave the bite half dug, he says. Feels wrong to do anything else, Daniel says. They stand with shovels grounded like stakes. The forest hushes around them. Even the logging road holds its dust. Somewhere far off, a chainsaw coughs and dies. Somewhere closer, water ticks from a fern into a shallow puddle, a precise sound that puts edges on the quiet. The fungus looks worse up close. Caps like torn tongues, gills so tight they seem to hum, lurid oranges bruised to purple, and under the sheen, a delicate bloom of white like frost on meat. Daniel has seen shelf mushrooms that look like horse hooves and puffballs you can kick into smoke. He has not seen this riot that drinks from rot and flaunts it. When a fly crawls into a crease and doesn't crawl out, he finds himself counting to 5 before it finally staggers free. Think it's that missing guy? James asks, not looking at Daniel, not looking at the tarp, looking at a blackberry stem and pretending it matters. Don't, Daniel says, though he is already seeing the bulletin board at the feed store, the curl at the corner of the flyer where someone tore a phone number tab and didn't call it. Philip Harper, it said above a photograph where the man's smile worked hard. Owner Harper Lumber and Mill last seen. He pushes the picture away. The mind is rude like that. It sets the worst thing on the table and asks if you want cream with it. Minutes drag themselves into shape. The sun climbs high enough to burn the mist off the lower pasture and lay honest light on the oak. Daniel wipes his palms on his jeans and leaves mud there like proof. He thinks about photographing the scene with his phone, but the thought feels like stealing. He thinks about praying, but the smell makes words shrink. Truck, James says. They both turn. Gravel ticks under tires on the far spur. A county rig appears first. White, antennae bristling, light bar asleep. Then another. Then the hum of a bigger engine and the van with doors that open to tidy trays of careful science. The first cruiser noses past the alder, wheels finding the shallow rut Daniel and James cut earlier with their boots. It stops short of the tape that isn't there yet. Doors open. The scene breathes in uniforms. Daniel's chest tightens. He feels the shape of the morning when he left the house. Coffee cold on the table, list folded in his pocket. The plan so ordinary it could carry itself, and he sets it down. The new shape is heavier. It belongs to other people now. The blue repeats in the lights, faint, not yet flashing, but ready. Sir? A deputy raises a palm as he and a second walk toward them. I'm Deputy Collins. This is Sheriff Thompson. You the caller? Daniel nods and points past them at the oak. We didn't open it. That was right, the sheriff says, voice steady as a level on a beam. He takes in the oval, the tape, the displaced soil, the mushrooms, the shovels, the men, the road, the sky. All of it goes somewhere behind his eyes and sorts itself. We'll take it from here. Yellow tape arrives like a warning spelled in highway font. A tech in white Tyvek pulls booties over boots and makes a slow circle. Camera clicking, lens huffing, breath measured. Another kneels by the tire ruts and lays a ruler striped in inches. Evidence markers sprout like bright numbered flowers. The smell punches anew when a breeze slips from the creek and lifts the tarp a sliver. Everybody pretends not to flinch. Daniel doesn't pretend. He looks away and stares at the bark of the oak until the roughness steadies him. Mr. Brooks, Deputy Collins says gently, if you'll stand by your truck, we'll get your names and keep you out of the frame. He walks where she points, hat in his hands now, a schoolboy with mud on his knees. James stands with him, shoulder to shoulder. The tape lifts in the wind and whispers. Daniel thinks of Velma, his late mother, humming hymns under her breath as she snapped beans, her voice fitting into the soft parts of the house. He imagines her at his elbow saying, "Do right. That's all." He imagines her looking at the blue tarp and closing her eyes and saying a prayer you use when you don't know which words to use. The radio on the deputy's shoulder crackles. Unit 2 on scene. Copy. Scene secure. Copy. The language of work overlays the language of shock, and both hold. When the coroner's van turns up the spur, cool white, decals straight, wheels slow, Daniel feels something unclench. Not relief. Not yet. Just the sense that the story they stepped into is moving under its own power now. The men in white lift their cases like you lift a sleeping child. Care. Respect. Business. Mr. Brooks, Collins says, pen poised but eyes kind. Full name and date of birth? He answers. His voice doesn't break. The smell keeps trying to push him off the narrow bridge between nausea and dignity. He keeps his footing. The tape bows as a breeze runs its hand along it. The fungus gleams. Beneath the blue, the ground waits with a patience that feels older than law. Sheriff Henry Thompson moves like a man who has learned to let silence do half his work. Gray suits his temples. The squint lines at the corners of his eyes keep count of hard years without advertising them. Deputy Sarah Jane Collins shadows him. Notebook open, pen ready, hair pulled back so tight the wind can't claim a strand. They scan without seeming to. The way people who've done this before read a room faster than the room can hide. "You're Brooks?" the sheriff asks. "Yes, sir. Daniel Brooks." Daniel points at the oak. "Loosened soil, fungus, the tarp. We didn't open it." "Good." Thompson tips his chin at the techs. White Tyvek kneels at the edge of the oval. Gloved hands tease back leaf litter with paintbrushes and patience. The forensic van yawns and exhales aluminum cases. The camera's heart clicks, clicks, clicks. Deputy Collins steps close enough to smell Daniel's coffee breath under the rot. "How far did you dig?" "Around," he says. "Outlined. Figured we shouldn't." He doesn't finish. She nods, understanding sentences you don't make. They mark tire ruts with numbered flags. A strip of plastic flagged as item 3, cigarette butt, damp, maybe a week old. Item 4, gray duct tape tails bonded to mud, with a faint fingerprint swirl no one promises will last. Item 5, scuff on a root, dark smear consistent with petroleum or blood. Swabbed, bagged, labeled. Chain of custody forms fill like careful prayers. "Tool marks?" Thompson asks. "Maybe from a square shovel," a tech says. "Flat edge, not a spade." She sets a measuring tape beside a crisp cut that never belonged to a root system. "Get it," Thompson says. He doesn't hurry anyone. He rarely does. Haste is a muscle criminals use. He lets it tire them out. They roll plaster over the tire ruts. A deputy shades the casts with his body like a man at a nursery counter shading seedlings. Another tech fits a macro lens and photographs the repeating chip in one tread. A missing lug that makes a telltale hiccup every rotation. "Gonna be half the county," James mutters beside Daniel, eyes on the tread, thinking of trucks like he knows their first names. But not all of it. The smell refloats on a cough of wind, and the tarp bellies. The coroner, Dr. Clara Jean Sullivan, precise, shoulders built like a rower, adjusts her mask and kneels. "Ready?" she asks the nearest tech. "Ready," he says, and the word lands like a stone. They cut. Tape peels with a long surrendering sound. Photographs freeze every inch. The tarp opens. A human shape surrenders its first truth to the light. Collapse and shadow. The suggestion of a face where bone has become geography. Fabric clings and then lets go. A belt buckle flashes dull and spends the flash in silence. No one speaks for a count of 5. "Male," Dr. Sullivan says quietly. "Adult." The forest seems to exhale a little grief. Daniel looks at bark again and counts grooves until the heat behind his eyes cools. James stares at the ground between his boots, shoulders risen. "Doc?" Thompson asks. "Time since death?" "Months." She doesn't guess more in front of a crowd. "Transport as soon as we're done." "Dental records requested." "Personal effects bagged." A deputy inventories in a low voice, each word a lid clicking shut. "1 leather belt, 1 buckle with initials, PH, engraved, 1 ring, yellow metal, left hand 3rd finger, 1 watch face broken, glass embedded in." He doesn't finish aloud. The pen finishes for him. The letters are not proof. They are a whisper you confirm with teeth and charts and widows. But the whisper is loud enough to carry to the feed store bulletin board in Daniel's memory. Philip Harper, whose mill's fork lifts carried timber like hymnals, whose sponsorship banner at the high school field faded slow because no one took it down. Sheriff Thompson's eyes flicked to Deputy Collins. She's already stepping away, phone to ear. "Mrs. Harper? This is Deputy Collins. No, not yet. We need dental. Yes, I can drive you later." Her voice stays professional and human in equal measure. Something you can stand under. While the scene breathes and clicks and scribbles, Thompson turns back to Daniel. "You and Mr. Whitaker can head home soon. But first, I need your initial statements." They stand by Daniel's truck, tailgate down, notebooks out. Collins asks the kinds of questions that look simple when written and feel complicated when answered. "What time did you arrive? What made you start digging? Who else knew you'd be out here? Did you touch the tarp? Did you see any vehicles on Mill Creek overnight this week?" As she writes, she photographs their boots, tread patterns, mud clumps, so no one later confuses the scene's story with theirs. "Mr. Brooks," she says at the end, pen hovering, eyes steady. Anything else you remember, even if it seems like nothing? The fungus, he says, surprising himself. It's wrong. I never saw it that thick. He gropes. The words slide away. It feels like it was fed. She doesn't laugh. That's useful, she says, and writes it down the same as she wrote times and names and facts that will go in front of a judge. The crowd gathers the way small towns do when the air itself starts carrying news. Men in caps that advertise seed, a woman in scrub pants on her way off shift, two teenagers who don't bother hiding how wide their eyes are. They hold the tape like a shoreline and don't cross. No one tries to film. Maybe the smell stops them. Maybe respect does. Maybe fear does. By early afternoon, the stretcher moves, careful shape under clean white. Dr. Sullivan walks alongside with one palm lightly on the sheet where a shoulder might have been. Daniel feels the moment like weather passing, pressure dropping, temperature swinging, something your bones register before your brain names it. Sheriff, a tech calls from the ruts. You'll want to see this. A partial manufacturer's mark pressed in soft clay where the tread cut deep. Not a full name, just enough letters to slice options in half. Photograph cast bag, Thompson says. And get me a list from every shop in the county that sells that tire. Collins is already texting a mechanic she trusts. He'll meet us at the shop, she says. Knows every wheel in 3 towns. Daniel watches the sheriff's mouth bend with what might be satisfaction and might be grief. We'll be in touch, Thompson tells him. You did right. He and James hesitate. Leaving feels like abandoning something. Staying feels like trespass. James solves it by handing Daniel a thermos lid of coffee that has gone bitter from waiting and tastes like work. They drink. They put shovels back in the bed. They stand one last time at the tape and look at the oak. Let's go, Daniel says finally. They slide into the truck. Before he turns the key, Daniel looks down the fence line. The sagging posts, the weed-sown wire, the small responsibilities that make a life. He breathes in through his mouth, out through his nose, the way you do when you've got a calf to pull and no time for fear. He drives away slow, careful not to splash mud over the casts, careful not to erase any part of the story other people will need to read. Behind them, the scene keeps moving. Flags flutter, plaster cures, pens scratch. A raven lands on a fir branch and croaks a comment that might be comedy and might be blessing. And under everything, the county's memory begins to draft a new page with a name it thinks it knows. The county moves the way counties do. Rumors ferment, then sour, then turn into something like certainty. By evening, a small crowd buzzes at the edge of the tape. Pickup doors thunk. Someone brings coffee that tastes like asphalt and kindness. Someone else mentions seeing Robert Hayes's F-150 out by Mill Creek after midnight 2 weeks ago. No one looks directly at Daniel as if he were a hero or a suspect. They look at the whole as if it might speak if watched long enough. Rain comes in a petty drizzle that can't make up its mind. Sheriff Thompson works the perimeter. Quiet questions, gentle pressure. Deputy Collins slips away, returns, slips away again, as if following threads only she can see. Just before full dark, headlights sweep the trees and a familiar shape pulls in. A white F-150 with a business decal half peeled on the tailgate. Robert Hayes climbs out. He wears a jacket too clean for work and a face too rigid for innocence. He scans the tape, the trucks, the faces, and lands on Daniel like he's measuring how much trouble a poor man can cause. You can't be here, Mr. Hayes, Collins says, stepping to meet him. I heard there was an incident on private land. Hayes' voice keeps its smooth public tone, the one he uses at council meetings. I do a lot of business with Harper. Did. I figured. We'll be in touch, Thompson says. Calm. Flat. This is an active scene. Hayes' gaze flicks to the casts curing over tire tracks. He goes too still. It's almost nothing. A single breath caught by accident. Not nothing to a sheriff who's spent 30 years catching tiny tells while men tried to lie politely to his face. What's that? Hayes asks, chin at the plaster. Nothing you need to worry about. Thompson turns away like the conversation is finished, and in that turn he gives Collins a nod. She moves left, past Daniel. Sir, she says quietly, take a look at the outer track. See that repeating nick? The missing lug chunk? You can match that to a good set of photos. Daniel doesn't know why she tells him, except perhaps to let him feel the floor tilt under someone else for a change. It doesn't take long. Hayes makes 2 calls, short and unhappy. He tries to leave. A deputy, Wesley Boyd, newish and careful, asks him to stay. A warrant scurries down the wire like a spider with someplace important to be. 40 minutes later, a town mechanic who does off-book work for everyone and their rivals is pointing at a tire on Hayes' truck and saying, "There, that chip. That's your print." At the station, the room is small and beige and not designed for drama. Hayes sits straight, jacket open, palms on the table. Sheriff Thompson sits too. Deputy Collins leans against the wall with her arms crossed, the pen gone, the sharpness of her gaze sharpened further. "Philip Harper died 3 months ago," Thompson says. "Did you know that, Robert? Everyone knows Philip is missing. You don't have a body." Hayes almost smiles. "Do you?" "We do," Collins says. "And we have the tarp you bought at Miller's Hardware with a card in your wife's name. We have your truck in the right place on the wrong night. We have a fight in the parking lot of the Rotary dinner you didn't think anyone remembered." Hayes' mouth presses thin. "Philip liked to needle. He liked to take what wasn't his. And you like to bury your mistakes under other men's trees?" Thompson's voice is soft enough to pass for kind. "Tell us before we have to hear it somewhere colder." The room contracts. Hayes stares at the table, then up at the ceiling's water stains. Daniel will never know exactly what he sees there. Some calculus of risk and pride and the bone-deep exhaustion that comes of holding a story alone too long. "It was supposed to be a warning," Hayes says finally, the words flat as nails. "He undercut me on the county bridge contract, lied to my face. After the dinner, I told him to walk with me. We argued. He shoved me. I shoved back. He fell, hit the curb. He didn't get up. He doesn't cry. He doesn't rage. He just keeps talking to get to the end faster. I panicked. I loaded him. I drove. I buried him where they were clearing. Thought it wouldn't be found. Then I saw the missing posters and I couldn't." He swallows. "I couldn't undo it." Thompson sits a long minute. Outside the room, somewhere down the hall, a copier grinds. The night unit laughs about something small. Life insists. "Thank you for saying it," the sheriff says. "Not because it's a kindness, but because truth matters. You'll be charged. Call your lawyer." In the parking lot, as the door opens, rain brightens everything. The oak at the fence line leans toward the dark. Daniel watches the deputy lead Hayes to a car. He feels relief and sorrow walk side by side inside his chest and decides there's room for both. They identify the body as Philip Harper. The dentist's chart and the belt buckle, the scar on a wrist that his wife Rebecca touches with a hand that is somehow steady. Closure isn't joy and it isn't peace, but it is a shape the living can walk around without tripping every time. The mill reopens under a manager who knows how to talk quiet to machines. The county lowers its voice for a week and then raises it again at a Friday night game. On Daniel's land, the whole is filled with care and prayer. Dr. Clara Jean Sullivan, sturdy, precise, makes sure the soil is returned in order and the scene released. The fungus is scraped away by gloved hands and placed in specimen jars that go to a lab and somewhere else, to long shelves where stories get cataloged. The oak keeps its scar and keeps standing. James shows up the next day with fence posts and a thermos. They talk about cattle prices and weather. They don't talk about the smell. They work in the easy rhythm of men who trust each other to lift when lifting is needed. Metal bites dirt. Dirt gives. The fence line straightens itself under their hands until it looks like something you can rely on. Before they close the last gap, Daniel does one more thing. He kneels with a sapling he bought from a church fundraiser 2 years ago and kept alive in a half-barrel that he almost forgot to water. He tucks it into good earth a yard from the oak, an Oregon grape with glossy leaves and a stubborn heart. He tamps the soil and presses his palm to the tiny trunk like a vow. "You gonna name that shrub?" James asks, deadpan. "Closure," Daniel says, almost smiling. "Or maybe just keep going." They laugh. The sound doesn't bounce away too quickly. It hangs a second, a decent thing in a place that has seen indecency. He goes home and stands in the kitchen where the clock ticks. He thinks about debts and cows and the way this house holds quiet like a quilt. He isn't a hero. He isn't a suspect. He's a man who smelled something wrong and wouldn't lie to himself about it. Somehow that feels like enough. If you want more stories that step out of ordinary mornings and walk you all the way to the edge of what people are capable of, the bad and the good, stick around. Click to watch the next video about a broken windmill that started humming at midnight and the person who finally listened. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me where you're watching from. Your comments help these true-to-life mysteries find the folks who need them. Out by the fence, the oak breathes. The new shrub catches rain, and Daniel's land holds the whole heavy story the way the earth always does. without commentary, without spectacle, but with a memory that will feed, someday, something green.